Hello there, everyone, and welcome to Lesson 1.1 of the Development Unit here in Global Politics 2. And today's lesson is entitled, What is Development? By the end of our lesson today, these are the following things that you should be able to do. First, you should be able to understand the complexities behind the definition of the word development, because there's a many varying types of definitions around development. So we're going to talk a little bit about how difficult it is to define. And then secondly, we should also be able to recognize the different subsets of development, which are human development, economic development, socio-political development, and also development as a type of or a form of freedom. So what exactly is development? Well, the exact definition of development is debated. Most people, there are just so many different varying opinions on what development is that it depends on who you ask and on what school of thought that person is coming from on how they would define development. And so, to be perfectly blunt, the exact definition of development is debated. However, development is often measured in terms of economics. Most people just look at economic development, and that to them is what is considered development. What is global development? Well, it's the measurement of economics and economic growth. However, there are groups of people out there that would argue that there are many other types of development, that it's not just something that is economic, that there are certain other things such as social and political and even environmental factors that are also important things or important subsets of development that should also be adequately discussed and researched. Now, many people often refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms or in context of global development. And so, by the way, this graphic here shows Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so, what you see here is at the very bottom here, these are the basic human needs that people need. These are the physiological things such as food, shelter, and clothing. So, this is the very basic human need that all of us in the world need. But then, of course, as you're going up the particular ladder, if you will, of the hierarchy of needs, you start to see where these particular things like esteem, love, and belonging, these are things like relationships. And so, since we're talking about relationships here, it's getting to be more complex. So, with the ever increasing complexity of the hierarchy of needs, the actual top of the pyramid is the idea of self actualization. And self actualization is the fulfillment of a person's potential and wishes in life. So, in order for a person to be at self actualization at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they're going to have all of these other basic things met. They have to have their food, shelter, and clothing. They have to feel like they're safe. They have to have love and belongingness or connectedness. They have to have self esteem that's propelling them to move forward so that they can feel self actualized. So, knowing that many global politics or global political scholars criticize the idea of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs model in terms of interpreting global development, many argue that in order for a dignified life to happen, that all of the basic needs are equally important, and so that leads us to discuss the subsets of global development. And the first one is human development. So, the definition of human development is written here: the process of enlarging people's freedoms and opportunities and improving their well being. So, again, the process of enlarging people's freedoms and opportunities and improving their well being. Now, the whole idea about human development here is the idea that this is all about the self. So it's talking about each individual human's abilities towards moving for their own development. So this one is personal and just one-on-one. So this is not talking about societal development. It's just talking about human development on a personal one-on-one scale. There's a tremendous focus in human development on the capabilities, which refer to necessary equipment people have to pursue life of value. So what this means is that in human development, does this particular human being have the capability to advance and become more developed? That's what human development study is asking. Does this individual have the capability to be able to move forward? So again, it's focusing on the self and not on the community, but just on you and your ability to be able to move forward. And secondly, we have Economic development. And the definition of economic development is the process of expanding a nation's economic power. And how does a nation go about doing that? It goes by doing increased productivity and increasing revenue. A nation can also increase in economic development by establishing new industries. So this means that a nation invests in research and development. And they can also innovate and diversify economic activity. What this means is not put all of your eggs in one basket. So diversifying, so have a little bit of agriculture, have a little bit of industry, have a little bit of technology, that type of thing. So these three particular items will help increase economic development. So, in looking at social and political development, this is going to be diving much deeper in terms of development. So, when you look at social development is referring to things like gender equality and education attainment. So, when you're looking at a nation and you're looking at their development wherever you're trying to study, if you're looking at how gender equality is in that particular country, how easy it is for a person to attain higher education or access to that education. Those are types of things that you're going to be looking at when you're looking for social development. Now, when you're studying some things like political development, this is where you're looking at how democratic is this country's government system. Is this government responsible? And what that means is that, do they listen to the will of the people? So if the people vote in a government, do they go along with it, or is there elements of trying to overthrow that government? Do they when the people are in desperate need of supplies. For example, if there's a natural disaster, does the government efficiently and effectively respond? So that's what it means by responsible government. Thirdly, are there low corruption rates? I think that goes without saying. What we all know what that means, that there's very little to no corruption. And then this one is probably most important, an independent and impartial judiciary. This is something that is becoming more and more prominent in the modern era, and especially even here in the United States with the U.S. Supreme Court. And so many people are monitoring that right now, because this is one of the key things about, is a nation fully developed, or is a first world, second world, or third world country? Many of that comes down to political development. And one of the biggest things about that is, do they have an independent and impartial judiciary? And lastly, we have a rather more modern concept about development, this idea of development as freedom. And what this means is that the concept of development as freedom is increasing in the people's ability to live a free, fulfilled, and happy life. So, one particular global political scientist, Amartya Sen, is the person that developed this particular idea, and the last name of this person is Sen, S-E-N. So they're the ones that created this idea. But what they're talking about is that we should emphasize the goals of development, not just the methods. So not looking at just social political development and human development, because those are different types of development, but looking towards the goals of development. So that's what we're trying to look at in terms of development as freedom, because as a person becomes more and more developed, then that should give them access to the freedom to be able to choose which type of free and fulfilling life that will make them happy. So some people have argued, there's many debates that argue back and forth about this over development of focusing too much on policy and implementation of policy. So global political scientists today are studying about, are we arguing too much about policy and implementation and not so much about the goals? Because if we're really trying to focus on getting humans to have a better life, then we shouldn't be focusing on policy and implementation. We should actually just go out and do it. And of course, economic growth, this is a key thing to note. Economic growth does not lead to development. Let that sink in. Economic growth does not lead to development. Just because a country is growing economically does not mean that all of those people are developing. Think about that. As countries have become more industrialized, we often have an increase in the number of poor people living in that country. So that's not advancing development. And of course, lastly, we must consider aspects of freedom that people may have. So in terms of development, anytime you're just studying development, you're going to have to look at that particular individual's or that particular nation's access to freedom. If they don't have access to freedom and freedom of choice, then they really cannot continue to move further up the development ladder. And so we have come to the conclusion of our lesson. So take a look at your notes and can you answer these questions? Do you understand the complexities behind the definition of the word development? Can you recognize the subsets of development such as human development, economic development, socio-political development, and can you understand the development of as a form of freedom? If you can answer any of those questions or all of those questions, pat yourself on the back. You did an amazing job. Now at this point, their stop sign is here. This is the end of our lesson. Complete any activity for 1.1 and then move on to 1.2 if the video is available. Thanks so much and have a great day.